Welcome to the Quality of Life podcast, where we explore how hospice and palliative care may enhance quality of life for patients living with a serious illness. Here is your host, hospice and palliative care leader and educator, Dr. Millicent Burke-Sinclair.
Hello and welcome to the Quality of Life podcast. I'm here today with Paige Wheeler, our Executive Director of the Four Seasons Foundation. Thank you so much for joining us, Paige.
Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate the opportunity.
Well, I always look forward to each of our guests, but I'm really especially looking forward to this today because back in 1979, when Four Seasons was founded, we were founded around the focus and the commitment to provide care to anyone who needed access, even if they were not able to pay. And so let's talk a little bit today about your role with the foundation and in fundraising. But to start, could you give us a little bit about your background?
Sure, I'm happy to. Well, I have always been a fundraiser. I came out of college and went back to the college where I graduated to work in the admissions office. I was there for about 6 months, and I was invited to be part of a capital campaign because I was an alumni and we were going to do a capital campaign. It seemed really fitting that I get my feet wet doing that. And I've never looked back. I love fundraising, especially for organizations I care about. And my father was in Four Seasons Care at Elizabeth House. And I always thought if there's ever an opportunity where I could raise money for Four Seasons, that's what I wanted to do.
I'm so grateful that you shared that. And, we serve so many patients throughout Western North Carolina. And when I think about that, there are patients who might otherwise go without care if we didn't have our foundation. And so could you tell us a little bit about how nonprofits, from your experience, go about fundraising? What might it look like?
So for healthcare fundraising, it's a lot different than, say, a college, university, where there's a lot of alumni who have affinity for an organization. So in healthcare, it really comes down to people who have had someone in our care that really develop relationships with our caregivers and have an affinity for what the care did for them and their loved one. So what we find in our foundation work for Four Seasons is that many times individuals just reach out to us to tell us, I could not have done this without you. I want to give back. Yeah. So individuals give to us from their heart because that's so meaningful to them, and it honestly helps them move forward.
Yeah. Well, and when you were sharing about your dad, I was reminded about my grandfather. And that's one of the many reasons that I choose to give. And I love how you said, I choose to do this because of the care that was received. Just the other day, you and I were both at the same location, and we heard so many amazing stories about the care that has been provided and how they want to be a part of making that possible. And so we realized that Four Seasons has a foundation, but not all nonprofits, especially in the hospice and palliative space, have a foundation, but they definitely have an opportunity to fundraise. And so care to share just a little bit about, maybe someone's listening and they don't live in the area and maybe there's a hospice that they're connected to and they'd like to know how to give. Or could you share just what are the different ways?
The different ways to give can really come down to whether or not you want to give a memorial gift in honor of someone's memory, or perhaps you want to attend a special event. Some hospices, such as Four Seasons, we do special events, and that's a great way to support. There's always a need for funds to help with patient care, or perhaps there's a building project. There could be a capital project that a hospice needs. But what I think for Four Seasons, our fundraising comes down to philanthropic support in 3 ways, and that is through how we have those connections with our donors, deepen relationships, and people want to give because of those relationships. We do the special events, but we also have a hospice home store. And that is an amazing way for people to connect with us because they can give items that perhaps belong to their loved one. It might be grandmother's china cabinet that they loved and they want to give to us, and then we resell it and we use those funds for patient care. We call that purchases with a purpose.
Oh, I just love that, Paige. And, one of the things that I think is so special that you just outlined is there is a way that anyone who wants to be involved in making care possible could be involved. And in fact, Four Seasons began, as I mentioned earlier, as a hospice created for the community, by the community, was nonprofit, continues to be a nonprofit, will always be a nonprofit. What that means, though, is that we do rely on generous donors. And so we have so many generous supporters of the community through our foundation. We're able to ensure that everyone has access to care regardless of their ability to pay. I wonder if you could share with us some about how our Angel Fund makes care possible.
Oh, I love our Angel Fund, and it's so necessary for individuals who don't have means to pay for care. They're too young for Medicare. Maybe their illness became so severe that they didn't have insurance, they weren't able to work, they didn't have COBRA, so they don't have those insurance funds, and maybe they've just not been able to apply for Medicaid. So we want to assure anyone who needs care receives it. Whether someone comes into our care, whether they're a child, we raise money for our pediatric programs. Parents need that extra level of financial support. Or maybe it's someone who is in their Medicare years, but they may not have the complete funding for it. And at the foundation, we believe we raise money for every patient that we care for. That's our connection to our community, because we're also raising money for grief services that those family members will receive, the chaplaincy services, and music therapy, which not all hospice organizations offer.
That's a really good point. And it leads to what some listeners may be wondering about is, do you fundraise only for patients and families in hospice? And the answer is we fundraise for that, but also more. Could you share, because we certainly have multiple service lines, talk about how the foundation works with that?
We have had such great success raising money for our home care. We had a patient who was caring for his wife, and she became just incapacitated. He himself was in a wheelchair. He needed an extra level of care. He just needed to get a shower once a week, and he didn't have the funds for that because he was pouring everything he had into his wife. And so we had someone from the community say, "Can I give the money for him to get a shower once a week?" And we're like, of course. So we developed an Angel Fund for our home care. Then we progressed that on to our Care Navigation. Now, Care Navigation is a service that Four Seasons has that helps patients and families find out what they need as far as care. It may be, do I need a second opinion? Do I need to get all of my affairs in order? What is it that I need? So that guidance to help care for patients. And so Care Navigation, home care, and as I mentioned earlier, grief services. We have special programs that we actually will go into the school system and help children who may have lost a parent, grandparent, or sibling, and that program's called Compass. So we have an array of programs that fundraising supports.
One of the programs is in our palliative care, and it makes me think that we have sometimes donors who want to give for a specific purpose. And could you give us an example of why maybe a donor would say, I'd like to make care possible specifically in honor of a loved one that was served in palliative care? Like that, talk about that connection again, because I realize we have some amazing stories of families who watch their loved one experience, say, our palliative care for a while, and then transition to hospice and grief support. And so it's really pretty beautiful when you can see how families are supported, patients are supported for years.
They can be supported for years, and we call that the progression of care. Recently, we had a donor stewardship luncheon, and one of our guests spoke to us. His wife started in palliative care. She was in our care for 2 years. And then in her final 3 months, she was in our hospice program. But he spoke specifically about the care he received in palliative care, and that is really important. It gives us an extra layer of care that can come into the home, that can give a caregiver some reassurance that these are the measures that are being taken that are good for your loved one, and here's some things we can do and support. So that palliative care is something that, as we raise money for it, is going to help that family in a longer term.
Thank you for sharing that. One story that I'm reminded by was the real experience of this husband an adult child who had been caring for their wife and mom for several years, but they just were at their end. They didn't know what else to do, but they knew they didn't have insurance. They knew they didn't have an ability, and they were really at the end and really pretty distraught. But then they heard about Four Seasons, and we were able to come in and say, it's okay. And because of our foundation, forming those relationships with people in the community who genuinely care about positively impacting lives, this husband, this adult child, this wife and mother was able to receive the care that they deserved, even though they couldn't pay. They didn't have a payer source. And so that's something that I think is important for our listeners to realize, is that we serve anyone who needs our care. And it's possible because of generous donors. It's possible because there's people who say, I want to make this possible. And so I wonder, could you share with us about how someone could go about making a gift, how someone could go about volunteering, how someone could support Four Seasons providing quality care?
We always are grateful for a gift of any size.
Yeah.
It always makes an impact. The best way to find out information, of course, is to look at our website, fourseasonsfdn.org, and there's a drop-down menu about Give Now.
Yeah.
But honestly, we would love to talk with you in person. Our office is on Main Street in Hendersonville, North Carolina, and we want to connect. Our numbers are also listed on our webpage. People give to people. Yeah. And so I would love the opportunity to sit down and talk with someone about how to make a gift. But if someone just says, I really want to make a gift now, going online to fourseasonsfdn.org is an easy way to do it. Now, let me also mention that we love it when people include us in their estate plans. Yeah. And that's by talking to your financial advisor about how that is possible, because as a nonprofit, it also helps you with your taxes. We love to have gifts from IRAs, and we can be one of your beneficiaries from your retirement account. So there's lots of different ways that you can support Four Seasons, or if you're not in our area, another nonprofit organization.
And, oftentimes a lot of individuals who want to give back may start by giving back as a donor and then decide they want to volunteer, or they volunteer and decide they want to donate. Could you share just a little bit from your experience about how you've seen volunteers as donors, or donors as volunteers, really become even more a part of Four Seasons?
It is so fun to see our volunteers in action. Mm-hmm. It is truly a service of love. Sometimes I'm like, you're here as much as I am. Our volunteers are just so fun and engaged, but we have opportunities where you can work in our home stores or on our special events committee. We have a lot of fun with that. Yeah. Our Elizabeth House loves to have greeters and volunteers in Elizabeth House. And then we have a special program where you might be helping us reach out to our grief services clients. So volunteering through Four Seasons is very important. And you can also go to fourseasonsfdn.org and see how to volunteer as well.
Thank you so much for sharing about that. One of the stories I'm reminded of recently is an individual whose spouse we provided care for said, I have to give back. I have to be a part. And this individual decided to do just that. And they give of their time every single week because they said, you gave so much to myself and my loved one. I need to continue to have that connection. And, I can only imagine and go back some years when I had a loved one served by us. It was difficult to have formed a connection with, say, the caregivers, the nurses, the team around you, and then suddenly them not be there. Well, we have our grief support program. And so that's what we want people to realize is that, perhaps your loved one passes away and so you're not needing the care that was being received, but grief support can help. And that's something for you and for your loved ones. But like this individual, they said, but I want to give back. And this is part of my journey of healing as well. And so that's a really beautiful opportunity, whether it's volunteering or donating or both. We genuinely want people all throughout the communities that we provide care to know that we are Four Seasons, the care they can trust. And they can be part of making care, trusted care possible throughout the community. And so in our final minutes, I don't know, Paige, if there's anything else that you would like to share, because I can just imagine listeners saying, I have someone in your care right now, or someone who's needing care, and I've been wanting to know about how to get more involved. I'm not ready yet, but there will be a day, and there might be a day that I need to be a part of this.
It's so rewarding when we receive a gift from someone. I get cards and letters with checks in them on a weekly basis saying thank you and naming some of our caregivers and saying, I don't know how I would have gotten through this journey without you. Yeah. And to me, that's the most rewarding part of what I do, is to be able to know and feel from our patients and families the care that they have received has made such a difference. In fact, at our luncheon recently, one of our volunteers, he's a volunteer now, he lost his loved one in our care, he said 4 seasons made the most unbearable event bearable. And so when I think of that, then I think of every gift that comes in that has helped make his journey bearable. And I want to do that for the rest of our community as well.
Thank you so much for sharing that. That makes me think about a story. I received a letter, and this actually was a letter written by the patient themselves. And they said that it was breaking their heart to look at their spouse and know what all the spouse was having to do and go through. And to have the relief, to have the support seems so similar to what you just said when Four Seasons came to be a part of the picture. And, one thing for our listeners to know is Four Seasons comes to be a part of, not to take over. It comes to say, how can we help lighten this load? How can we add support? How can we bring confidence? How can we extend compassion and reassure you? And I'm just so grateful that we get to do that. Thank you for sharing. And thank you to each of our listeners for caring about, perhaps it's yourself, perhaps it's a loved one, or perhaps it's the community. So if you'd like to know more about Four Seasons, please go on to our website at fourseasonscare.org. And we really look forward to hearing from you soon. Thank you.
The Quality of Life podcast is produced by Four Seasons, the care you trust, providing award-winning quality hospice and palliative care to Western North Carolina. For more information, visit fourseasonscare.org or call 866-466-9734.